Follow me, follow me. We're going to be right here with the Chieftain. And everyone that is here, the Chieftain can also see you. We do have a webcam set up. So, the Chieftain is ready. You want to give him a wave and give him a shout? Over to you, Chieftain. Hey guys, and then we gotta take a break from the booth activities, okay? No more booth activities for a little bit.
Is also in common service. And Conquer, of course, is the heavy load tank and load 20mm American cannon designed specifically of heavy Soviet tanks. And the time came to issue a replacement for both. And it seemed a lot more effective to just do one tank to replace both Centurion and Conqueror. Now, at the time, they were talking about doing this in combination with the Americans. And the Americans had this brilliant idea in 1995. They were testing out a hypervelocity 90mm smoothbore gun. And in the interest, there was this strange delusion back in the Cold War era that countries could work together to create a cheaper vehicle, which, yeah, no, that doesn't happen. But the idea was this new British tank would also be able to swap out with the 90mm high-velocity smoothbore that the Americans came up with. Fairly soon, the British decided this was a stupid idea, and they went away and they built their own 120mm instead. But that wasn't the only concession that they made to having multinational operability, because about 1956-57, the European militaries got together and decided it would be a good idea for all tanks or all military vehicles to have multi-fuel engines. Prior to this decision, Chieftain was going to have a Rolls-Royce V8, kind of like a Super Meteor, basically, which had been in service now for over 10 years, was very reliable, pretty good. But 1957, the MOD is told, no, you're going to use a multi-fuel engine. And they select the Leyland L60. Which becomes Chieftain's Achilles heel. Now, when you say multi-fuel today, you think all you do is you just pour fuel into the fuel tank, whatever the fuel is, and it burns. So the M1 Abrams, for example, will do that. It's a computer control system. It works off the basis of temperature, and the fuel flow is adjusted automatically to accommodate whatever kind of fuel you've thrown into it, be it diesel, be it whiskey, whatever. Not so with the L60. The fitters, the mechanics, had to actually go and tweak the engine on the L60 to accommodate whatever fuel type was being run. And it could take up to 8 hours to convert from one type of fuel to another. Now, of course, in practice, what would happen is they simply use diesel. So this capability of the engine was completely unneeded, and ended up being more or less the Achilles heel of Chieftain. So Chieftain had a great gun, had great armor, at least for the time. If it could make it to the top of the hill, it would sit there and say, this is my piece of ground, try to take it off me. Unfortunately, it didn't always make it to the top of the hill. But troop trials started in the early 1960s, and there were a couple of interesting features that they got rid of. For example, it was originally going to have an automatic rammer for the 120. Didn't work. They decided to go fully manual loaded. Now, of course, the thing about Chieftain is the manual calls it two-piece ammunition. In reality, you do need 3 pieces to fire it. So you need the projectile, you need the bag charge, and you need the vent tube. And the vent tube looks like a small little caliber 50 casing. And it works as the primer, in effect. People worry whether or not having 3-piece ammunition slows down the loading process. In reality, no, it doesn't, compared to a 1-piece ammo. Because if you think about it, you're allowed to lap load with a British 120. That means you can have the round, the projectile sitting on your lap, in your hands, ready to go. You can't do that with a NATO 120 because it's combustible. It's a fire hazard. So as soon as the round is fired previously and the breech opens, you immediately have the projectile in a second and a half flat. You grab the propellant charge. It's really light. It's really easy to handle. You shove that in. Close the breech, close the safety guard, the vent tube loads automatically. It's a 10-round magazine, and you're good to go. In reality, your firing time is probably more limited by how long it takes the gunner and the commander to acquire and range to a new target. So you start off, Chieftain for ranging had a caliber 50 machine gun. Fired 3-round bursts. It had a special exploding tip at the far end. Yeah, it wasn't really designed for use against vehicles to destroy them. You'd estimate your range, you'd fire your 50 cal ranging round, and then you would adjust off that with the main gun. So you see if the little splashes are marking on target, and then you push the big button. That was removed and replaced in favor of a laser rangefinder in subsequent marks of Chieftain. And if you look at a lot of the Chieftain tanks, you won't be able to see it on this one because it has a steel blue armor. But you will be able to see the slot on the left-hand side where the ranging machine gun used to be, and it's been welded over and plugged up. So as I say, on that particular Chieftain, maybe the other Chieftain you might be able to see one, but I don't think on this. The next thing they came up with was called the Improved Fire Control System, and this allowed lead and elevation to be automatically applied. And the way it worked was you would track a target, you'd laze, you'd hit auto lay, and a little oval which was around the target suddenly goes off target. And your job is to put the oval back onto the target, and that will apply the lead. So that was the Improved Fire Control System. The next thing that happened is the thermal imager, the TOGs, which showed up on the Mark 11. So the Mark 10 you have next to you still has white light and infrared. It's good for knife fighting. That was a design requirement from the very beginning. Just how good it was is questionable. So if you recall Operation Think Tank that we did many years ago, we had an interview with Bob Griffin, who was a Chieftain guy himself, and he said the only way that you could see targets at night was if the range staff put little illuminators on the targets to help you see them, and then you could shoot them. So it was questionable. You'd have to pull the entire site out, pull the entire site back in when it went from night to daytime. It was a lot less convenient than it is today. Chieftain's battle record, well, it saw combat service in 2 countries. Iran against Iraq. They started off with over 800 chieftains. By the end of the war, they were down to 300, some of which had been captured by Iraq and placed into Iraqi service. They actually proved to be surprisingly vulnerable. So Iraqi tanks, T-62, T-72, were punching through the front of these Iranian chieftains, which is part of the reason why the additional armor called Stildrew, which you can see on the Mark 10 to your right, was developed. The other combat user was Kuwait. And if you want to have a look at it, was called the Battle of the Bridges, and a Kuwaiti armored brigade with chieftains held up the Iraqi Republican Guard for about 8 hours. And the problem was basically they ran out of ammo. You can imagine the ammunition gets burned up fairly quickly in a war. They ran out of ammo. They moved back into Saudi Arabia. Now, when they went into Saudi Arabia, the chieftains were then replaced by Yugoslav-built M84s. So that was the end of chieftain's service life there. The last big user would have been Jordan. They re-engined their chieftains. They called them Khalid. So it's like a chieftain body with a Challenger engine is what Khalid was. So that is the short version of Chieftain. So I'm going to pass you over now to Sophie Line, who I believe is talking with the crews, who will tell you all about the fun of life in a Chieftain tank.
Thanks, Chieftain. Yep. Here I am. I'm going to pass the mic up to Sophie and the Berlin crew.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, Aquino Tank Weekend is the place to be, and I love military history. I'm actually I'm a YouTuber, and I like to feature armored history. And what a better place to see armored history than here at Ontario, Regiment Museum for the best event of the year. And I'm very pleased, very privileged, and very honored to present to you the gentlemen who have come to speak with you today. They crewed this tank for real, and they would like to share some of their experiences, their perspectives, and that's invaluable. So I'm going to pass the mic over and allow them to introduce themselves. First, we're going to meet their commander, and we're going to go down through the positions, and they're going to share some of their experiences, and you guys can ask some questions and stuff like that as well. Here we go.
Thanks very much, Sophie. As you may know, that Berlin, it was surrounded by at least a couple of Soviet armored divisions, and we had 18 tanks against them. So it was a bit of a difficult David and Goliath scenario. But I served there from 1988 till 91. That's till 92. So that included when the wall came down. And as it happened, on that evening, 4th Troop happened to be in the east on what we called a shopping trip. So we were over there in the afternoon and in the evening having a meal over there. We came back through Checkpoint Charlie at around 7:30 in the evening. Yeah. And, and I booked out with the RMPs, and he said, anything happening over there? I said, no, it's just the usual, quiet as a mouse. You could see tumbleweed in the evening in the east. When I got home to my wife, she said, what have you done? I said, I haven't done anything. She said, the wall's down. I said, it was up a minute ago. I didn't do anything. And the wall had come down in the time it took us to drive back from from the wall. So very interesting times, and you all saw on television what happened after that. I take Berlin posting for the 5 years that I was there as the best posting I had in my army career. And that was spending about 18 years of that in Germany. But as I say, we had 18 tanks. There was 4 troops of 4 tanks and 2 squadron headquarters tanks. There were the squadron leader and the 2 IC. We were all over there with our families, as I said. All the single lads lived in a tower block in Smuts Barracks. Next to Smuts Barracks was Spandau Prison, where Rudolf Hess was held, who also died while we were there. And overnight it turned into a naffy. Amazing stunt. What else can I tell you? Your turn.
Hi everyone, I'm Beaker. Right, I was the loader of this vehicle. Okay, so basically I fed these guys. I also made sure that it was all ammoed up and ready to rock and roll. Okay, but the main thing that we needed on this vehicle was tea. Without the boiling vessel, we would not work. Right, we would shut down, close down, stop what we was doing. If that wasn't working, we weren't going to war. Right, and but yeah, serving with these guys was absolutely a fantastic and amazing time. I joined Berlin Armoured Squadron in 1987. I joined that as B Squadron when it was the Mark V Chieftain, and Bob came up later on and took over as Troop Sergeant from Sergeant Mick Geraghty. Then with Matthew as gunner, I got a posting back down to my regiment down in Munster, where I became part of a squadron, and started working on Challenger 1 tanks. And from there, the Gulf War started. I transferred over to reconnaissance troop, hence the deserts, and did the Gulf War with Recce Troop. And that's another reason why I'm here today as well. So I served on both Berlin Armoured Squadron and Recce Troop with the 1420th King's Hussars. After the Gulf War, I then came back to Berlin. That's when I became a loader. And do you know what? It's one of the best positions on the vehicle. Well, as Bob's just mentioned, my cooking is amazing. We tend to use cans in BVs, right, the boiling vessel. This particular day, an apple pudding. Oh, I love apple pudding. I boiled the BV dry. Exploded everywhere. Wasn't it a pretty sight? You didn't get your dessert that day, did you?
I nearly had to tell my grandchildren that I got injured in the war by an apple pudding.
Really?
And I still got the shrapnel in my hip.
And those children I used to babysit for as well. Right, so I'm going to pass you over quickly to Matt Eney, who was the gunner.
Okay, everyone. I learned how to be the gunner of this tank in about same as Darren in '87. But I started in Berlin first with 3rd Troop. Then I moved over to 4th Troop and ended up with Darren and Bob of the same tank. We got split up as the Gulf War started. And like I said, after the Gulf War, we came back. I think we didn't actually work back together again at that time, about 90. We all moved in our different directions. I got out, I was as a medic. I got out in 92. The guys then moved off back to Munster in, was it 93, 94, I think, was it? When 92. The regiment left Berlin in 92. Now there's no battalions or infantry or the British Army or American soldiers now in Berlin. They all moved down to West Germany or back to England or to countries where they came from. Sorry, my German keeps coming through. Yeah, sorry. And I stayed in Berlin till now, and this is the first time I've met these guys for 30 years now. And it's a proud moment. It's an honor. Yeah, not changed. That was as funny as everyone. Funny comments and all that. I know it's going to be hard now, going back tomorrow and not seeing these guys for another couple of years. Maybe next year, come back over and we'll see how it goes. Okay. So, I'd like to wish everyone a nice day still. And if you've got any questions, just come over and ask. Okay, thank you.
Just to give you an idea of what life was like in the Berlin Armoured Squadron on a yearly basis, we were always very busy. There was a number of things we had to carry out every year. It started around springtime when we used to clean all the wagons up. We used to repaint all of this. We used to tape everything off, do all the white, then do the grey, then do the brown. Everything had to be perfect, and we then did the Allied Forces Day Parade, where we drove around Berlin and down past the Siegersäule with the Americans and the French. After we'd done the Allied Forces Day Parade, we would then have to prepare for the Queen's Birthday Parade, which happened in the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. Once we'd got through that, we then had to take the wagons out of Berlin down to West Germany, where we spent 2 weeks on the firing ranges and 2 weeks on the training area on Lüneburg Heath, or as we call it, Soltau. So that was quite a long time away. To do that, we had to get another squadron in of tanks from West Germany to take over what we were doing while we were away. And that may take all of the ammunition off, count it all, give it them, and then when we came back, do it all again, accounting for every round. Once that was done, the rest of the year we went through crash out drills. The brigade commander would crash us out, normally in winter because it was nice and cold, and so we'd have to come in from our houses or from wherever, get on the tanks, get all our machine guns out and everything like that, and go to our deployment positions. The rest of the time was taken up with training, but as I say, and these guys will probably tell you the same, it was the best posting we ever had, and we loved it. My wife loved it, everybody loved it. And we was there right up until certainly I did. I put these wagons on the train to leave Berlin at the end of it all. My son was born in '92 in the American hospital in Berlin, my youngest son, and he still goes back there now because he feels a bit of an affinity with it. So yeah, Berlin, the place to be. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
So my question for you, this was the first tank that you trained on. And can you tell me a little bit about what you thought about it when you started to get acquainted with it for the first time?
Okay, so when I arrived in Berlin in 1987, my first position for this vehicle was in the driver's position. I was taken out by a guy called Sergeant Frank Bailey, and he took me downtown Berlin city centre. All right, and I'll tell you something, when you're driving a 60-odd ton tank, it's absolutely awesome. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. You know, just seeing people stop in awe. And, you know, the gun was being traversed off at times as well later on to get down to the minefield and the Grunewald. And, but yeah, just sitting in there with all that power, it was amazing. And I'm sorry, I've got one of my old soldiers laughing at me. Thank you. All right, I'm not embarrassed much. But yeah, basically sat in there. We used to go into the Grunewald and drive through the Fibia built-up city, wasn't it? Is it the Fibia built-up area? What's it called? The Ruhleben Fighting City. We used to do exercises in there. But the actual camouflage came from a guy from he was a Major Davies from the 4th 7th Dragoon Guards. Because when the Chieftain entered into Berlin itself, it was urban camouflage. He disagreed with what we was using in there. It was the total wrong camouflage. So this particular cam wasn't the first type of cam that we had in there. It ended up like this. However, there was different variations of it as well. A lot smaller cubes, but we ended up with this, and we loved it. Also inside the driver's cab, you've got batteries. Great stuff. When you're trying to do a service on them, they pop. And one particular year, I ended up with battery acid in my eyes. Not pretty, right? Really hurts and stings. So I advise never open up the batteries on them. You've got 2 tillers in there to manoeuvre the vehicle. So yeah, left and right. And you've got your foot pedals for your gears and reverse as well. And I loved it. But it wasn't my favourite position. My favourite position was that, the loader's position.
Why was that?
Because I got to feed him apple pudding. He loved his apple pudding after that. You never got my apple pudding, did you?
No.
You're lucky. So, yeah, but the loader's position was definitely my favourite. I think you got to do an awful lot more in there. Looking after the crew, making sure your cam nets was up, making sure that your driver was doing all his servicing. When we had alt parades or anything like that. Then, obviously, if we go on ranges, you've got to make sure that you've got all your ammunition ready to rock and roll and kick some butt. And with that, Scotty was my gunner, my commander, and we was going down Horner Ranges, a 2-tank Fibia shoot, where we had 18 targets, I do believe.
All 18?
I think, and we hit all 18. And that particular year, we won the trophy for it. And it's one of the best memories I've ever had. It was a great crew. Sadly, the driver isn't with us today, and I am going to give him a mention. And he's Trooper Ian Carter, commonly known as Peanut. So, respect to you, Peanut. Rest in peace, son.
I would like to ask and see what it was like for you to be with these members of your crew again after so much time.
Well, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, 30 years. I've been out seeing Matt for 30 years. A lot of them I haven't seen. They're only except on Facebook. We've just had our Blackpool reunion, the 1420 King Hussars in Blackpool, where we usually end up with about 450 ex-members of the regiment, you know, get together and have a slight drink and enjoy the night. But yeah, it's really great to see these guys again. You just can't understand how. But I mean, we just basically take up the conversation from where we last had it. You know, and I say, "Where's my apple pudding?" And he still hasn't found it. But yeah, it was just great times. I mean, we had a very good troop in Berlin. There was lots of competition between troops and stuff. We won the gunnery trophy pretty much every year we were there. We won, everything. The troop just meshed really well. And I couldn't fault them. I couldn't have asked for a better troop. So from my point of view, it was fantastic.
You could really hear Mr. Duffy's passion for making sure that your stories are shared out when he was doing the presentation for the parade and showing off the different vehicles and stuff like that. So it's a real treat to be able to hear from the folks who did it for real and their unique experiences, because you can read a book, you can watch a movie, you can play a game, but to get how it really felt and to get how it really was, you have to speak to someone who did it for real. So it's a real treat to be able to hear from you guys today. Is there anything that you remember specifically about these guys when you were serving with them 30 years ago that you'd like to share with folks?
Well, all I remember, it was laughing from early hours of the morning to the middle of the night. There was always something didn't go right. There wasn't, it was like a big family together. We helped each other if there was anything wrong. You always could talk about it and everything, and even going out in the evenings. No one was left in the room, so, to get bored or whatever. There was always something going on. If it was going downstairs, playing darts, snooker, going into the pub, going out into the night, there was always something on. Or if you get in, didn't turn up in the morning because you've been drinking too much, you stood on guard for the next 2 weeks. Or you had to go into the command centre, up into the attic, and start sweeping the bird shit out, with the gas mask on. And then noticing that there's someone else up there doing the same thing. But it was all right. I got on with everyone, same with the guys. And living on a tank, you've got to get on with each other. Because you spend maybe 24 hours to 2 weeks on the same tank in the middle of nowhere, and just keeping up the humour and always joking and laughing, playing games. It's always laughing when someone fell off the tank. He put the aisle there, I didn't. No, it was him. Oh, why? Well, just to see if you notice it. No, landing on the floor. Did hurt a bit now and again, but you always go back up. But it's like a family. It's when I look back on the memories, like they said before, it was the best post that I had. I had a hard time in England with the training and everything, but it made a man of you, so to say, in a way. When I look back now, what we did there in Berlin and all that, like driving through the streets, that you driving in. Well, Bob's got photos. People can have a proper look what it's like when you're driving through. Driving through a big city with all the cars still coming past with the police escort and the big tanks, and then the people coming out tend to slow down so they can put beer on the front, because it's like, hey, thank you for being there. The feel of being safe. If you hadn't been there, it's something to live. With the people, the Germans coming out, waving, so on, everything. It's went on to your heart. You're like, well, we're actually doing something here. That's like on the Allied, driving back from the Allied Forces Day Parade, or coming back from urban training in the fighting city, or if you've been up to training with the Americans or with the French. Now, there's always a bit French or a bit gaming between each other. Who's better and all that. But in the end, we were all happy. We always got on with each other. Okay? And thank you. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. I want to open up some questions and answers from the audience, if that would be all right.
Yep.
All right.
No problem.
Who's got some questions for these guys? Yeah. You can come on up and I'll give you the mic and you can ask.
Bloody-
Oh. Come on. Yeah. And if you guys want to ask anything about their service, about their vehicle, come on. Come around the side. I'll give you the mic.
It stink after a couple of days in there. Yes,
Yeah.
it did.
Hold it close.
Is there a specific reason why the barrel is wrapped?
Are you talking about this cover here? Yeah, it's basically, we call it a thermal sleeve, and it's to keep the barrel at an optimum temperature, so it's not too hot, too cold, because obviously when you're firing, there's a lot of heat build-up, and that's dissipated through this middle bit, the fume extractor, and that takes a lot of the heat out as the round pulls everything out of the end of the barrel, and it just keeps everything at an even temperature.
Anybody else have any questions for these folks? Yeah.
Come on, don't be shy.
Yeah. We got their time. Yeah, come on up, come on up.
Where did you guys train on how to drive the Chieftain or crew it?
The system for training people on tanks, it starts from when you first join. Usually when we joined as junior leaders, the first trade we would learn would be to be a gunner. If you joined at Catterick or wherever, you would first trade would be a driver. But the whole idea of the way the British Army works is that people are interchangeable. So over the length of time, you would move from driver to gunner to loader and then hopefully up to commander. So you would, by the time you're the commander, you've done all of those jobs and you know how every bit of it works. So you know, you're fully informed on everything. So there's a gradual progression, and as you go through, you know, you climb up through the ranks as well. Thank you.
Any more questions? Come on up.
Did you gentlemen ever have the opportunity to train with the Canadians that were stationed over in Germany during the Cold War?
Did you ever have the chance to train with the Canadians that were over there stationed during the Cold War?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. It would have been great. I did have an exchange visit for 2 weeks with the Swiss Army once, but they never really fight anybody, you know, but it was good. Yeah, so no, it would have been great.
All right.
What was your role in the military?
Want to go?
I had many roles. I started off as a gunner. Then went on to being a driver and then up to a loader. And then from there, I learned basically on this vehicle first. But from there, after the Gulf War, at the Gulf War, I learned on the Scorpion as a driver. And then I moved on from that. The regiment then amalgamated in 1992 with the Royal Hussars, and I went on to Challenger 1. And then later on to Challenger 2. So these guys, if they like Bob, he stayed in. Matthew didn't. He got out and he only worked on Chieftain. So the longer you stay in, the more vehicles you're probably going to work on, and in different positions as well. Now, with that, the regiment now is called King's Royal Hussars, and they are looking at the moment of transferring from tanks onto Ajax. Now, the Ajax at the moment is an American project, and that's actually failing at the moment because the crew are going deaf inside the vehicle. So that's on hold at the moment. But hopefully it'll all get sorted. But yeah, we do train in certain positions, but we can train in them all as well.
Yeah, we do get some strange other jobs that we have to do as well. In I think it was 87, I was tasked with building a stables for 250 polo horses for the World Polo Championships in Berlin. So, and I was ordering hay from East Germany and things like that. So you just adapt, overcome, and crack on. But I didn't speak German. I knew nothing about horses. But by the end of it, we did.
Very much. Unfortunately, that is our last question, but they're going to stick around, and you can come up and ask them, and they'll speak. But I would like to thank them for their time on our stream today, and I would like to thank them for their service. And in your own words, thank you for doing that. Thank you for being there. Very much. Round of applause for them, please.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you to our Berlin Chieftain crew. All right, come on down, fellas. Or you can stay up there because we're about to get the Chieftain on. We've got time for Nicholas, the Chieftain Moran. I feel like it's confusing. Berlin Chieftain, the Chieftain. I don't want to confuse y'all. But we do have time for just a couple of questions. 1 to 3 questions, Chieftain. 0 research time. But I did want to give everyone here that has been hanging out and came down specifically to join for our live Inside the Chieftain's Hatch to have the chance to interact directly with World of Tanks' very own, the Chieftain. So does anyone have any questions for the Chieftain? It could be specifically about the presentation that we just saw on the Berlin Chieftain, or it could be really about anything at all, because let's face it, the Chieftain knows everything. Almost. Knock on wood. Woo, I'm setting you up. Woo, woo. He knows all the things that you want to know. That's the way I'm going to put it. Here you go. Oh, do we have the Chieftain on? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I hear you.
So the Chieftain uses a 120 millimeter rifled barrel. Why did they decide to go with a rifled barrel instead of a smooth bore like a lot of the other countries did?
All right, so you got a couple issues here. The first is that Chieftain's gun was selected before T60 selected its smoothbore. There was, as I mentioned, there was some investigation into using smooth bores, especially amongst the US, and the smooth bore was considered as one of the weapons to be used by by Chieftain, but it was only going to be a 90 millimeter. Now, when you fire a smooth bore round, there's not many disadvantages, but there are 1 or 2. The first disadvantage, excuse me, is that you need to leave room for fins. So if you look at a modern heat round, for example, you got the charge, and then there's a long stem and then a fin at the end, as opposed to having simply a much larger shell, which granted fires a bit more slowly, but has a larger capacity. Now, if you look at the type of ammunition that the British had, particularly for in the Cold War era, they loved HESH rounds, and you can ask the lads there about HESH. In American, it's HEP, high explosive plastic. In British, high explosive squash head. And what that does is when it impacts against an armor plate, it kind of spreads out, turns into a sort of a cowpat of explosives, which then fires. Now, if the round is spinning when it impacts, it actually spreads out the explosives a little bit more, and you get a greater effect. You also have, especially at the time, remember that we're talking late 50s, early 60s, fire control systems, crosswind sensors and the like aren't what they were today. Crosswinds affect finned rounds a lot more than you might think, because you have these great big sails at the back, and it actually gets very complicated because you get the wind blowing it, the round as a whole one way, but you also have it disproportionately affecting the arse end of the round, sending the round back the other way. It gets all very complicated. If you're firing a large rifle solid shot, basically of high explosive or whatever, it's a good old-fashioned rifling and twist, and that is very well known, very easy to control or calculate for. So at the time, there were still quite a few advantages to going with the rifled gun. Now, by the time you get to Challenger 2, or at least Challenger 1, and you say, well, why the hell do we still have a rifled gun in Challenger 1 and then Challenger 2? Simply because of ammunition compatibility. The British had a certain amount of ammo in stocks, and it was a lot cheaper to use the same gun than to convert to a smooth bore. Although, of course, now with Challenger 3, the British have announced that they're going to do exactly that. So that's your long answer.
All right. Anyone else have a question for the Chieftain? Sure. Jen Grant. Hey, I recognize this guy tunes into our streams, Chieftain. The motor pool working. Oh, you can't hear me. Maybe. Chieftain, do you hear me? Perfect. Okay, this is Jen Grant. He tunes into our live streams. Okay, what's your question?
All right. So my question for you, Nicholas, is in the British tanks, the Halon fire extinguisher can be deployed by a infantry person from the outside if the tank is on fire. That obviously floods the inside with a carcinogenic, poisonous fire extinguishing gas and all that kind of stuff. Do the crew members have to train to get out of the vehicle completely blind and dissensed by what has happened? Is that the exit strategy after fire extinguisher deployment?
We had in Iraq, we had an accidental discharge of a halon system. The bottle by the driver went off, which shocked the hell out of the driver. In fact, it shocked the hell out of the entire crew. But the vent actually comes and hits the driver in the shoulder, and because it was Iraq and it was really hot, and we weren't being employed, and he was on his arm. However, when this gives us an excellent example of what happened, he simply opened the hatch. So when the halon goes in, you open the hatches, and you can see reasonable. There is, at least in the US, and I strongly presume most other professional armies, what's called the tank crew gunnery skills test. And in the US, this is 15, must be shooting machine, but number 15 is crew evacuation.
Mike is out. Oh, there we are. I'm back on.
And you have a set amount of time
That was weird.
to get everybody out of the tank if there's a fire, pull the fire extinguisher, actually the external one on the whole side, and then get 50 yards behind the tank. And I think you have 30 seconds to perform that order. That also includes traversing the turret so that the driver can get out more easily. We have never, there is no standard in the requirements for it to be done at night or in the dark. But frankly, once you get in and out of a tank every day, you know where the hatch is anyway. There's not very many ways you can get lost getting from the inside of a tank to the outside of a tank. So I don't think doing it at night or in limited visibility was really all that much of an issue. I mean, you know where the handle is. It's always in the same place. It's always within reach. You don't need to see it.
Alrighty, Chieftain, the Wi-Fi and the stream is a little So we're gonna end it here with you today.
Do I?
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for zooming in for this. Everybody, let's hear a round of applause for the Chieftain. Thank you so much, Chieftain. We will see you when we get back to Texas. And now, why don't we kick off with some more of the live show here, which of course is the raffle show. Let me see those raffle tickets. Hold them high, hold them high. Alrighty, so you all know what we're raffling, right?